How many people live on Earth? Have you watched this, or maybe your students have? And I want to know, there are different opinions, that there are many more people or many fewer people. But it's definitely not the number that's being broadcast everywhere. And what it's about.
You can watch it right now.
Come on. Come on.
Sure, if you want. By the way, is this a question from you or from the viewers?
It's a question from me.
From you, okay? I'm not going to talk about what I do anymore because I've mentioned it in countless videos. So for those who are interested, YouTube, to the rescue. By the way, sometimes I get asked, can you teach us how to connect with the higher self? The work in school lasts 6 months. It used to be a year, 6 months. 6 months, 3 lectures a week. And this is not a theory. This is not about webology. It's not just me sitting and talking about something. These are practices. It's 3 lectures a week, practices. So teaching someone something in the format of a single video is, of course, extremely...
They want a masterclass.
A masterclass. But again, I'm on the path of classic disidentification. I've talked about this many times. So complete and total disidentification leads to the natural manifestation of that very inner energy. By the way, this path is the key to protecting against all sorts of entities, demons, all that stuff that, scares everyone. Like, what if we touch a demon? We're following the path of the most ancient teachings. We're going through a distillation. Roughly speaking, if we're being honest, yes, what I've come to is essentially a distillation of all the ancient schools, specifically the ancient schools that knew perfectly well how to deal with all these things because they had thousands of years of experience mastering all these techniques. That's it. And complete total disidentification down to the level where you can no longer disidentify. You go layer by layer. You just peel them off and get to it, to that fundamental layer, which you won't be able to remove anymore. It's definitely a big complex, but that's just if we're being really brief. All right, let's go.
Come on, how many people live on Earth?
How many people live on Earth? First, you need to let this out. Each exhale is a layer. Numbers are an artificial story. So I see a certain charge, a certain volume, which I then later on use my mind for. I don't really see any, images there. I specifically distance myself from the visual channel. I specifically I receive feeling, being in it, being myself. I'm like, this is in the literal sense of the word, like, yes, an analog of an enlightened one or like an analog of a clairvoyant, something here. In that spirit, exactly in that direction. And then you just try to interpret this kind of multidimensional picture with your mind. And the most difficult part really isn't getting that picture, but interpreting it in a way that matches what you initially saw. Because after all, this is a level beyond the mental body. The etheric astral mental body is beyond the mental body. From the level beyond the mental body, you kind of pull this transcendence here and then try to label it with words, earthly words in some way. Because of this, in terms of numbers, it's quite difficult. But in terms of a certain charge, a big charge, a lot of souls, a lot of people, very different.
Can I ask, is it more than 8 billion or less? Something like that.
So look, if I take, let's say, 8 billion souls, and I take the Earth with the number of souls that exist on Earth, this needs to be double-checked, but the charge, as of today, there are fewer on planet Earth than 8 billion. That's really interesting. That's already a headline. I can already see the headline for the video.
Uh-huh. Do you know how many, do you feel that it's really much more?
Less. On planet Earth right now, there are fewer than 8 billion.
In fact, it's much more than it is now, they say. Right on 1 billion, 2, 3, or maybe even more.
Yeah, I get it. You mean the numbers, how much bigger the numbers are compared to what actually exists.
But it definitely outweighs.
Well, it definitely outweighs, not exactly catastrophic, but it definitely outweighs. And you know what? I'm just stepping out of there now. It makes sense because, again, the modern global, so to speak, the global power, the power of globalists, which actually has little to do with globalization. It's only beneficial for them because one of their agendas is that we need to do this. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, because we have overpopulation. So it's convenient for them to manage this. The topic of overpopulation or the topic of climate change, which has already changed so much, has become so terrible that it's really necessary. It's like accepting a certain bunch of different, let's say, green agendas, which in fact, again, they're no longer fighting climate change, but rather directly influencing those guys who are adopting this very green agenda. No, still less. I feel like it's less than 8 billion, but, it's not, roughly speaking, half as much, but it's less. So again, this is also, well, I'm just stepping out of there again. By the charge, I see that it's less, well, roughly speaking, we have rather like this. Yeah, so we have 8 billion, right? And here we have planet Earth. Here it is. It's not exactly like this, but it definitely tilts. So 8 billion is a heavier weight than what we have now on planet Earth. And this, again, is justified because there are still statistics. There are certain institutions that measure in different countries, right? And still, roughly speaking, there's 8 billion and 1 billion, but you can't really hide that anymore. You can adjust it a little by about 25-30%.
Yeah, you can also feel what the trend will be. Will the population grow or decrease?
I don't see it growing. And we've already looked at this a huge number of times. I would even say that it will more likely decrease and spread out across the planet. No matter how many times we've looked into the future, in 50 years, everyone has always seen a trend towards a decrease in the number of people. Why? It's not very clear because, again, there are many different branches of reality. They converge, they diverge, but the general trend is towards decreasing and dissipating. And no matter how many times I've looked, for example, 70 years into the future, I see that the Earth breathes easier. The Earth breathes easier. There are fewer people.
Maybe it's shedding ballast, which is why it breathes easier.
The clock then says this much. I believe that, again, since our planet is vibrating at a higher frequency, after all, souls choose this specific sandbox based on their goals and tasks. We've already talked about this today. And those souls that, as they say, want to go through the intense, hardcore experience, they won't go. They won't go into a world where ethics, aesthetics, humanism, all of this from a very early age. Well, I mean, they need more intense experiences. Well, due to the goals and tasks they set for themselves, that's already a separate topic why this is needed. And because of this, when the world suddenly rises up a certain ballast of souls, those who no longer resonate with this rise, they leave. They leave and choose other worlds that are simply closer to them for this very reason.
So it turns out it's expressed. It could be with these people there. So no one will say that this soul left because there were other goals. So he completed whatever he wanted to do here on Earth and then left. Well, it could be that a person got sick or something else happened to them, like getting into a car accident.
Exactly. And we can already see this in developed countries, so-called developed ones. We have a very high decline in birth rates. There are certain trends in society, yes, especially in Western societies that are working to slow down, specifically to slow down the process of childbirth.
That's the most interesting part. Let's discuss it.
We don't have the right, according to typical laws in Russia, to discuss this.
We can't, right? Well, okay, that's a pity.
Well, in general, these are certain links in this global chain. This kind of thing, like some kind of architecture that architects are building, including the forms that exist now, will also go away because they are disharmonious. From the perspective of the higher self, no matter how many times we've looked at these forms, they are disharmonious. It's still, well, it's not harmony. It's a certain deviation from balance. At this stage, this is also one of the levers of reducing birth rates. Over time, they will simply become unnecessary. But from the perspective of the higher self, it's very important to note that these forms are disharmonious, and it's not because I have to talk about it. According to the legislation It's actually true because we've looked at this many times. These deviations in the sphere of interaction between the sexes, let's call it that, yes, these are inharmonious deviations because there is always something there. It's like the feeling that the spirit hasn't coped, because if, roughly speaking, you have such a strong deviation, then, well, again, if you want to be a woman, you choose the female gender. If you want to be a man, you choose the male gender. It's, well, like, you always have a choice.
So it's some kind of mistake, right?
It's not really a mistake. It's, like this. It's just a lack of experience. It's a lack of experience that's how it gets compensated. For example, you've had a lot of male lives in the past, and suddenly you decided to choose a female life. Or you had many female lives and chose a male life, but it just didn't work out. And it's playing now. So on the side of reducing birth rates, yeah. But over time, this story will disappear. The universe always leaves those models that play on the increase of life, not the decrease of life. That's why the universe is structured this way, right? It's abundant. It wants there to be more abundance with each new year, with each new century, so that there is more abundance. And those things that, on the contrary, work in the opposite direction, they fade away over time. But at this stage, it's playing on the side of just this overall movement towards reducing the expansiveness of brotherhood.
Listen, so this Western propaganda of sexual minorities, do you think it's all about that? Is this done to reduce the population?
Yes, as globalists have a clear program to reduce population. About them, their program is clear. They say that the population needs to be reduced. Again, look, modern globalism. Globalism, we talked a little about this today. It has nothing to do with it at all. What is globalism? Globalism is a global world when there are no borders, no states. You can go wherever you want without visas. You are mine. You have, as it were, yes, you have you have a single language. You have some kind of perhaps diversity of cultures, but still somehow it penetrates into something else, interacts. This is globalism. Global markets. Where can you, just there, I don't know. You can easily sell something to your friend in Indonesia, visiting him for the weekend. So the global world is also about technology. It's about airplanes, about some fast means of transportation, really fast ones.
But that's the other side, the positive one.
That's the other side. It's exactly the positive one. Yes, exactly. And today it is not globalism, it is globalism. Transnational corporations, which, yes, this is essentially a kind of corporate dictatorship that just makes money. About this story, and they have, well, behind them there is the so-called, this is the deep state. In this deep state, there are certain clans, yes, a certain tool that tells you what to do and what not to do. So among other things, they have this story that there are too many people.
So that's it. What is this made for, in order to, well, actually, what is their main goal, by the way? Whose goal is it to reduce the population?
Well, yes, among certain global circles.
And who is that? Are these the same Masons that everyone talks about? Or who is doing this? Or are they different ones?
It's a combination of esoteric clans that are mainly found in Western society, in the so-called Anglo-Saxon society. This Anglo-Saxon society in its time, I decided that the planet is very nice, really beautiful, but there are too many of us here. And as they say, the little moose, as we say, won't be enough for everyone. Poor little moose. All of this, what needs to be done, we need to make it so that, in a good way, so that there are fewer of us. This is the theory of the golden billion. So there are 1 billion people and they get along just fine on these pastures, in these fields, in these meadows, in the forests. The air is clean and the water is clean. As of today, look, you can't really swim in our rivers anymore, right? The sea is also questionable. Yeah. You arrive somewhere in India and, it's like, well, these are like huge cities, massive. There are tons of them and there are tons of people there. You arrive in China and again, huge cities, massive, what they call human towers, yeah, and so on. Here, and what if everyone is resettled? So that everyone has a high salary. And so that everyone lived in nature, clean food, fresh food, ecology, and so on. Well, there won't be enough for everyone.
So it turns out that they care about us. So these very clans come to us with such care and say, guys, let's all be gay so that we can live happily. Well, something like that.
They are trying with all their might to reduce the population, especially in developing countries. Because, there are a lot of them, and as they say, no one counts them. These aren't my words, just so you know. These are like their words, the words of certain powers. These are the words of certain powers, certain elites, which everyone knows about. And in Russia, everyone knows about them, of course, and in the West. This is, a purely Anglo-Saxon approach. So, right now, we're smoothly moving out of the sphere, out of the body, the higher one. I'm already into politics, but nevertheless, this might be interesting to someone. By the way, if you observe, overall, looking at the development of Anglo-Saxon society, take America, for example, a group of guys gathered from Europe, who realized that they don't belong here, that they want more freedom, they want more of everything, Moreover, many of them were absolutely of a bandit criminal plan. And where did they go? To America. They arrived. And in America, there were the indigenous people living there. What did they do to them? They killed them all. They just killed them all and settled all over America. Here it is, a brief history of the United States. And take the colonies, all the colonies, Indonesia, Malaysia, India. India was a very rich country, incredibly rich, and they all lived quite well. India is poor today. A lot of it is precisely because the Alma-Saxons came to them, and unfortunately, this is the general approach overall. This Anglo-Saxon culture that there is us, and there are our interests. And ideally, when their interests started to extend beyond their individual states, whether it was France, England, or something else, but rather within the framework of the whole world. And that was already global interests. So after their interest became global, they became interested in the whole world and realized that, the whole world, there won't be enough for everyone. This is a specific plan of these elites. I don't know why. I think I'm going to write a text on this topic, deeper, more structured, and I'll post it on my blog. You might be wondering how it correlates the theme that the spirit comes here to this world. And it just can't cope with this new body, right? And this conscious manipulation by the elites actually correlates very well because they provide the opportunity for choice. Here's the most interesting part. And if this person had no choice, he wouldn't have chosen it. He wouldn't have chosen it. He might have just not reached that point and would have gradually dealt with his body.
Who are you talking about?
I'm drawing a correlation between what I was saying before and what I'm talking about now.
Yeah, I mean, who gives the choice?
Society gives the choice. Those very elites who...
It's a choice without a choice. Like that, I would say...
Basically, yep.
Especially in some countries. It's just impossible there.
Especially in some countries.
It's just so deeply ingrained in everything that...
Yeah. And you see, they do this intentionally with their own cultures. They start with their own cultures, like French culture. So as of today, there was news that I think in France, 25% identify as LGBTQ+, something like that. So one in four in France, they identify themselves exactly like that. And France is dying. It's dying. Yeah, and it's the same in the American plan. There are a bunch of schools where kids come to school and they're taught from a very young age about how there are, 22 genders, however many there are now. I'm already falling behind on the trends.
This is even without chips. And what will happen with the chips? It's going to be terrible, just terrible.
Well, chips are a whole different topic. Yeah. You see, here's the thing. They specifically launched this narrative with their own cultures. For what purpose? In order to then kind of start for this lifestyle already formed within themselves to project outward onto other cultures through cinema, for example, through Hollywood, through games, through movies, because still 99% of all games, movies, music, and so on are concentrated in Anglo-Saxon culture. So there are these, political scientists sitting there, and that's analysts who launch certain processes and trends, knowing why all of this is being done. Getting back to your original question, because we strayed too far from it. After all, there was a question about what will happen in 50 years. I'm saying that in 100 years, in 200 years, there will be a certain decline in the population. Unfortunately, this overall trend, this homosexual one that we just talked about, is actually playing into that future. So these guys will still be able to achieve certain successes. As true scientists and researchers, we simply state the fact that they will be able to achieve certain successes in this. It's obvious to everyone that the number of people has decreased. So this is also the story about the decline in birth rates. That's one. Two, it's the departure of souls through deaths, wars, cataclysms, and so on, which there will also be epidemics in the next 20, 30 years. Unfortunately, we've also considered that there will be. And what else? And so they will, some kind of settlement. So the level of prosperity will still increase across the planet and people will be settling down. A little bit from the big cities, they will be moving out to the outskirts. Notice what happened after COVID. Everyone has moved away. The very concept of remote work has emerged. This before, it wasn't as popularized in such a way before. Everyone started moving away. That is, in principle, we already see the formation of this future. So, you see, as always, the system of checks and balances is working against the hangers-on. So, for example, the Anglo-Saxon culture is pressing this button. In the aviation culture, Russia and Belarus are pressing a different button. And these two levers are on everything. On a planetary level, they balance each other. That's how it always works. If someone is pushing hard in one direction, someone else will definitely push the opposite lever somewhere.
Will children be brought out in artificial wombs? That's how they show it in the movies. What do they call them in horror movies? Will that happen? And will it be possible to edit DNA, not just generate it? And specifically bring out those children that are needed, for example, to have more girls and make them, well, for example, so that they are born and know for sure that she is a girl. So will such things be carried out or not?
Yes, it's already being done. So basically, yes. So look, the work with DNA is already actively underway. Scientists who work with DNA today, in fact, this is one of the most promising professions that earns a lot of money, on par with IT specialists. IT specialists, those who work with artificial intelligence, those who work with genetics, and all the possible guys at the intersection. All of these stories. Today, this is one of the highest paying professions in the world. This is already actively underway, and in 10, 15, 20 years, it's definitely going to be implemented more and more. We had a video about chips. The other day, it was released on YouTube, and the guys were all writing in the comments like, yeah, are you even paid for this? Paid release?
Yeah, and the video...
Where's my money? Where's my money, please, if it's paid for?
This is a really cool interview, guys. Check it out. Really, very much.
I said there, what? I said that chips, from the position of the higher self, it's not bad. But any person who reaches the higher, he will see that from the perspective of a higher self, there's actually nothing wrong with it. Nothing. This is a very high level from which everything is perceived as just new rules of the game. As Alina pointed out very correctly in this video, God created everything, including chips and the matrix, because God is everything. He is dissolved everywhere. God the Creator, He is absolutely dissolved everywhere, meaning in every little cell, in every particle, including that very chip. Right. And the implementation of chips is just a change in the rules of the game. And so no matter how much we resist it, they are already being implemented. Then there's the story about editing DNA. It's already being implemented. We can't do anything about this at this stage. If it's already starting to manifest in reality, it means that on a subtle level, the charge is already very strong. But in the future, what can we do? We can shape the charge on a subtle level. A more ethical, deeper, and wiser attitude towards all these things, regarding all these things, so that in the future, people can apply these technologies, which will be implemented anyway, in a more ethical and harmonious way. Here's what we can do. Stopping a train that's already speeding along full throttle will just run you over without even noticing. But in the future, we will slightly correct the track along which This train will depart. This is something we can already do.
The question that came to my mind, why, if there are already technologies for growing the children we need, like the ones we want, why create more on top of that? What's with all this shaking up with minorities, forcing people to accept that they belong to a different gender? So there are, or do they just want to influence from both sides and use all the levers?
From what I've already understood, these guys never put all their eggs in one basket. Well, that is, if you have a lot. Yes, if you have a lot of levers of influence on the world, then you can pull this lever, this one. And as a result, you have something will work better. You know how it is, like with big business. It never makes money from just one thing. He always has multiple verifications of incoming funds. So I believe, yes, I believe that's the case, but it needs to be reviewed at a higher level. I'm speaking separately because what I just told you guys, look, is about 70%. There were already things that were being reviewed, yes, but 30% of that was my assumptions from my mind. We need to sit down with the guys from the club and really dive deep into this topic. But at this stage, I believe that what I will formulate is correct.
Dear friends, I invite you all to my course with a personal vision, Return to the True Self. This course has been around for over 12 years. And recently we launched it in English with my complete personal vision in 6 modules, working with blocks, working with egregores, working with the ego, contacting the higher self. Answers to simple questions, answers to more complex questions. And then there's what we call the Great Journey. It's contact with space, contact with the planet, contact with God, contact with anything at your request through the higher self. Health, finances, relationships, purpose, past life. The course is available at any time. You can sign up for it using the link below this video. Come on over. I'll be waiting for you.